Welcome back to the Brothers Mahoney. This is Michael.
And I am James.
And today we are discussing the fourth episode of the newest season of Doctor Who, being Lucky Day. And this episode aired May 3rd, 2025. And this was written by Pete McTighe. And he's written a few things in the past. He's the guy who wrote Koblam, which was, well, we'll talk about it at some point. And he also co-wrote Praxeus with Chris Chibnall. And you know what? I'll say Praxeus is one of the episodes I liked a little bit more. Maybe the things I liked more about Praxeus came from him as opposed to Chibnall, but who's to say?
That's how I've always imagined any episode that was called written with Chris Chibnall, honestly. The gold pods always come from the other right, and the bad pods come from Chibnall. I would say fight me, but I'm convinced I'm right.
Yeah, it may be a simple way to see it, but simplicity does not mean one is wrong. And it should be mentioned that we are actually recording this one the day after it aired. We just didn't have time yesterday with our conflicting work schedules to both watch and record. So we watched this the day it aired, and we're just now getting to recording it. So that's life, I suppose.
But to be fair, we actually did rewatch the second half of it just earlier today as well. One, because, well, I guess a little spoiler, we quite liked it. A lot, actually, for the recent series. And so, yeah, we just rewatched it earlier today.
Though certainly based on what I'm seeing online, we seem to, I don't know if we're not necessarily in the minority, but Lucky Day doesn't seem to be getting the same praise that either Lux or The Wall was, which, I don't know, to me is disappointing, because I actually like this one more than, well, both of those. I mean, to be fair, Lux is more of a, I guess, traditional Doctor Who story compared to this, but this one just had a vibe that I was vibing with, so youth say.
Yeah, this one was, for the record, a Doctor-lite episode on the whole. Even though the Doctor appeared, was it 3 times throughout?
Yeah, sounds right.
Yeah, so it was a Doctor-lite, but it's very unusual, and unlike most of the Doctor-lite episodes, to me it didn't feel like a Doctor-lite one as much. And I think a lot of that has to do with the strong presence of Unit. But I suppose we'll get into that.
Yeah, and I guess getting into it, what was the plot for this one?
The plot is as such. Ruby Sunday faces life back on Earth without the Doctor. But when a dangerous new threat emerges, can Ruby and Unit save her new boyfriend, Conrad, from the terrifying Shriek?
And actually, before we get into the story proper, I think it's worth mentioning, I thought this was sort of interesting, that the aforementioned Shriek has actually been referenced before in Doctor Who media, although in somewhat of a lesser-known location.
Yeah, so the Shriek were actually first mentioned in the 2024 book, Doctor Who book, of course, Caged, starring the 15th Doctor and Ruby Sunday. During that book, Ruby is recounting some of the things she's gone through, and one of the things he mentions is outrunning a Shriek, which is just an offhand reference in the book, and it was just tied in with other offhand references of things we've seen. But come a year later, we actually see the Shriek in the flesh, so to speak. And there is this extremely interesting connection between the books and the show that usually doesn't happen in any way like this. I'm not sure anything up to the 12th Doctor ever referenced as specifically as this, something that happened in the books of all things.
Yeah, so it's an interesting sort of random case, but I thought sort of playful. I'm not sure how many people have actually read some of these newer, I guess they're technically new series adventure novels still. But like James mentioned, I forget what we were discussing, but like he mentioned in the past, those seem to have been losing somewhat of the, I guess, either popularity or visibility. Like they don't write nearly as many as they used to, which, you know, might make actually the quality better. Who's to say? I haven't read any of them, but they're not as important, I think, as they used to be.
No, like we said previously, they've kind of had a bit of a downturn in book output. There was only, 4 books published for the 15th Doctor last year. And that's still the whole year. We used to have so many books be published for David Tennant, for Matt Smith. Even Capaldi got some. But when Jodie came along, she didn't really get all that many on the whole. She was Doctor for 4 years around there. And yet she, I swear, only got maybe 6 books in total. Maybe a couple more, but it can't have been many more than that.
And as for Lucky Day, there's quite a few characters who pop up who are at least somewhat important. So I'm just going to go through some of these pretty quickly. First off, on somewhat atypically, we have Millie Gibson playing Ruby Sunday. Like James said, this is a Doctor-lite episode that primarily follows Ruby with her new BFF, Conrad. So Gibson is really the star of this episode. Then we have Conrad Clark, played by a Jonah Hauer-King, who I'm not familiar with, but he has a swag to him that I appreciate. Next up, we see the return of Kate Lethbridge-Stewart, played of course by Jemma Redgrave. And last time we saw her was the series finale of last season?
Yeah, we saw her in the Legend of Ruby Sunday's last Empire of Death, which she got dusted and then she came back alive and then she grabbed somebody's hand because she's, I guess, now romantically with Abraham.
Indeed. Christopher Abraham, who's apparently listed as a colonel, so who's to say that means anything, played by an Alexander Different. And like James said, he appeared before, but he was pretty much a non-entity, insert nameless unit soldier here. But he gets a little bit more in this story, and I suspect that he might get a little bit more to do in the future, who's to say? But I thought he might be actually worth pointing out. And speaking of people worth pointing out, Shirley Bingham is back, played, of course, by Ruth Madeley. And she popped up first way back in the Star Beast, so the beginning of the second era of RTD. And honestly, she still hasn't done that much, but I always keep hoping that she will do more, because I think she's a character that could be quite interesting.
Yeah, I get the feeling that she could be too. I agree, not much has happened with her.
She's pretty much a human equivalent of the Lynx.
I was about to say the same thing. She might as well be the Lynx, only she can move. But yeah, she hasn't done much, but hey, at least it's not Morris. So I'll take that any day.
Yeah, and other people of somewhat less import, we have a Kareem Alexander playing a Jordan Lang, who's another unit soldier. I forget, was he like an analyst or something? I forget, he had some type of thing he was specializing in.
I'm almost positive he was an analyst, yeah.
Yeah, it sounds right. Then we do indeed at the beginning see the Doctor on Belinda. Doctor, of course, is Ncuti Gatwa, who, like James said, he popped up 3 times throughout the episode. All at different time periods too, so that's so fun. And then Belinda just appeared in the beginning, played by Varada Sethu. And I do appreciate, on a side note, how the beginning is sort of like immediately picking up after the while. They get to Earth and they're hoping that, hey, maybe they finally made it back to the time period 2025 that they're looking for. But it's not quite right. I think they was it 2007?
I think it was New Year's 2007, so I guess technically January 2007.
So yeah, I did appreciate that. And like I said, Belinda just appeared in the opening sequence, but yeah, it was fun. Then lastly-ish, we have Mrs. Flat who pops up, played by Anita Dobson. She pops up, surprise, surprise, at the end of the episode. And we'll actually talk in length about that appearance because we think it's pretty playful. Like James said, we actually rewatched the second half of this episode, which we haven't done for any previous Modern Who episode. I think I did watch pieces of that and Babel again, but I certainly didn't watch the whole thing. So that is a nice, I guess, indication of how much we actually enjoyed this one. Then we get some characters who I'm not even going to bother throwing pictures up for, but both Carla and Cherry reappear. They have some brief scenes with Ruby, so it's sort of nice. And then this guy doesn't really matter that much insofar as the actual plot goes. There's a character, I think he's technically a barkeeper. I think he certainly worked at that bar, but there's a guy named Alfie who's played by Paul Jericho. And he's only worth mentioning because he actually appeared as a Castellan in both Arc of Infinity and the 5 Doctors. So 2 Fifth Doctor stories from, I would imagine, the early 80s. Probably 82 or 83, something like that. So I think it's sort of random that this guy pops up again, and I think it's sort of fun.
Yeah, no, it's always nice to see an actor who appeared in old classic Who show up again. And I don't feel like it's happened all that often, honestly. I could be wrong about that. But on the whole, I just feel like it's not been in vogue for the new series. And it's not like this guy plays anybody too important this time around. But nonetheless, it's kind of cool that after 40 years or so, they came back to be on the same series.
Yeah, and it's not like anyone watching this would recognize him. It's like, hey, that's a Castellan of the 5 Doctors. But still, I think it's an interesting thing to note. What's also interesting, and I'm sure this didn't pass by anyone, but the beginning, or at least the first, 8-9 minutes almost of this episode almost feels sort of like Love and Monsters, which is a widely abhorred episode of, God, was it season 2?
Yeah, it's near the end of season 2. Finally enough, right before Fear Her. which is even worsely, I think, regarded.
Yeah, and we'll talk about Love and Monsters sooner or later, but I do think they had a sort of similar feel at the beginning, and now, of course, the episode didn't stay that way. This episode, if you haven't seen it, you should watch it. It sort of takes you for a ride. But I do think a lot of people noticed that comparison at the beginning, and I sort of wonder if that, I guess, colored any viewpoints going forward, but that's just pure speculation. Who's to say?
Yeah, in some ways, honestly, and I believe TV Trope says this, usually we don't like to read too much of other views and whatnot until we record, but because we had to record this a day and a half later, it was kind of unavoidable. But TV Trope's nonsense that he's basically the anti-Odin who was the main character in Love and Monsters. And I think there's a lot of fairness and truth in this statement. I've said publicly before, I'll say it again, I think Love and Monsters is way overhated. I think it's actually a good episode. And it's coming up in season 2, so we'll be discussing it on the whole not too long. And the way it plays out in this case, much like Alton did, Conrad saw the Doctor as a child. We see him, I don't know, what was he, 7, maybe 8, seeing the Doctor and Belinda land in New Year's Day 2007. This was, for the record, the only appearance of the, I suppose what you could call, present-day Doctor with Belinda, because the other 2 Doctor appearances were previous things in his timeline. So I think it's actually rather fun that this is the only thing that continues this story from the Doctor's current point of view, and then I guess we'll just pick up with him later, because all the rest happened either before, in his case, or to somebody else. But Conrad ran into the Doctor and Belinda as a child. Then, I forget how many years exactly later, 1 year, I believe, before the main story of this one, give or take, he saw the TARDIS again, and that's when he saw the Doctor and Ruby this time, running and dealing with the Shriek. And again, that's so much like Alton, how Alton saw the Doctor and things related to the Doctor's happenings at various times throughout his life. And it's kind of interesting how they did a reverse version of Alton, if Alton was a different person than he was.
Yeah, and Conrad, like James says, he sort of sees the Doctor and Ruby dealing with the Shriek. I think the episode says the Shriek came from a pocket dimension, and like once a year they come out to hunt or something, so they seem playful. They have this sort of like green saliva type thingy, and they track people down and they hunt, and they just seem like good creatures. And I think what's interesting about that scene is that, according to some dialogue from Ruby, that actually takes place in between the events of the Davos Chord and Boom. Because I think Ruby says something like, oh, 20 minutes ago we were hanging out with the Beatles or something like that. And here they are trying to deal with these Shriek.
Yeah, we didn't realize Ruby had so much fun in between Boom and the Davos Chord, but apparently she was meeting these joyful boys.
Well, given what she went through during Boom, it's a good thing she did have some fun beforehand.
Hey, Boom was her first alien planet.
Yeah, and she almost got killed. Well, I think technically she did die, so.
Yeah, I suppose she kind of died. And then we got the joys of the ambulance popping up all the time. That was a really fun Susan Schist appearance. But, I'm just getting distracted about how in the 3rd episode of this season, the companion was Astor sat and Astor survived.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of those allusions between like episodes 1 and 1 of series 15 and series 14 and so on and so forth. It doesn't take anyone watching that deeply to see that both Boom and The Wall are clearly Dalgate episodes, or that 73 Yards and this one, Lucky Day, are both Doctor-lite episodes with a focus on Ruby. And that type of thing has happened thus far somewhat consistently, even to a lesser extent, the Robot Revolution and Space Babies. I would say the Robot Revolution is like a exceptionally light episode, but it certainly didn't feel as, I don't know, grounded as so many of the recent ones have.
No, I agree. Out of the 4 episodes this series so far, easily, without question, my least favorite has been the Robot Revolution. Now, maybe it will be better once the season is over and we go back, but I don't personally have high hopes that will be the case.
But even the fact that it's possible, I don't know, I think it shows promise. Because I would argue that no matter how well the previous season could have ended, nothing would have made Space Babies a better experience to go back through. So the fact that Robot Revolution might be made little bate seen it again, I think is, I guess, a testament to the potential this series has. Which might sound, I guess, exceptionally harsh, but I hated Space Babies with a passion of a burning sun.
Flames in my heart, flames flaming. But yeah, no, Space Babies wasn't it, guys. I'm not sure why Rhapsody Davis thought, hey, let's start the season. Let's start one of the introductions many people might have to Doctor Who with Space Babies. But I thought it was a terrible episode. And the fact that it actually has over a 5 on IMDb literally blows my mind.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting going forward to see if any of these like inter-season connections continue. Certainly, I have to imagine it's intentional at this point. I could imagine it not being, to be honest. It just seems way too purposeful. But we only have, 4 episodes left this season, so it'll be easy to keep watch.
I'm still not used to how short these seasons are. It's kind of incredible thinking about it, though we're just already halfway through the season. It just doesn't feel right.
It does not. But you know what does feel right? Podcasts. And you know who also thinks that? Our homeboy Conrad. Which is my beautiful segue of going to talk about Conrad. Conrad in this episode seems to be, I guess, I don't know, the host or one of the hosts. I guess he is the host of a podcast, which is, what's it called? Lucky Day with Conrad something.
Lucky Day with Conrad Clark. And that name comes from something the doctor told him when he saw him as a child. The doctor just found was a 50 pence.
Yeah, some foreign coin that neither my brother or I would recognize in the street. It's not American money.
American money is not going to be American money.
Hashtag China, let's do this.
But the doctor, he's jovial. Although, interestingly enough, this is a doctor, and we didn't rewatch this opening scene, but we sort of. This is a doctor after the confrontation at the end of the episode. So this is a doctor who hypothetically might know who this kid is. I'm not sure. I need to see if the doctor seems to be hiding any emotions during the conversation.
Yeah, maybe it's a circumstance like in the movie where he looks into the kid's eyes and he can see his future.
Well, no, I'm just saying this is a doctor traveling with Belinda, so this is a doctor after the confrontation at the end for him.
Yeah, but I don't know. I would expect him to recognize someone he saw like years previously when they were a kid. But I guess you never know.
We just need to rewatch the scene again.
Did he recognize Davros when he was a kid?
I mean, this is true, but Davros changed, man.
No, yeah, he didn't look quite the same. He got what they call color glow up. So,
but how did he fix all of that in the Great Destinations Carol? Hashtag it's not great. But he hands the young Conrad a coin and just tells Conrad, hey, it's your lucky day, because he hates how the new year. The doctor's just trying to be nice, apparently. Either that or he's trying to make sure the podcast gets the name Lucky Day to keep it in the correct time.
Yeah, and it's not clear to me exactly what the podcast covers. I imagine anything Conrad wants to talk about. But we do see him interview Ruby, a former companion of the Doctor. And Conrad has, I guess, had a long fascination with the Doctor. I mean, given his encounter with him when he was a kid, you could imagine that. So he's always, I guess, interested in, I don't know, researching, looking into all of that alien doctor type stuff. And he's actually able to get through persistent, I don't know what you'd call it, posting pictures. Hey, have you seen this woman? Because like a year previously when he saw the doctor on Ruby deal with the Shriek, he like snapped some pictures of himself and quickly of the woman. Which, you know, is sort of creepy, but hey, I guess you do what you have to do.
I'm very surprised Ruby didn't have more questions about that. It seems they're kind of high on the creep level.
Yeah, but that's where Conrad thrives.
It is, but he did have a very good, clumsy, nice boy persona.
Yeah, you know, I don't know this actor, but he did have a very, I don't know, Hallmark romantic comedy-like feel to him. And I should be clear that I didn't really know anything going in, but I just didn't trust him to begin with, and I doubt James much did either. Because he just seemed a bit, I don't know, too nice, or it just didn't seem right. But yeah, he does play off the suave, charming, nice guy act pretty well. And then when he switches, he does it quite beautifully too. But yeah, he interviews Ruby. They talk about the existence of aliens, which on a side note, apparently is widely accepted right now. And James mentioned this. But even as soon podcasts like the beginning of Series 11, was it Yas, did it either know or accept the existence of aliens.
Yeah, and the woman who fell to Earth, Yaz, was very resistant to the idea of aliens existing. And I believe, to Chibnall's credit, though it really shouldn't be any credit at all, he made the Doctor a bit exasperated about that, which one should be. Now, this is one of the things that comes from this being a sci-fi series set in modern-day Earth. Much like the whole dictator ruling Australia thing, which I always reference from the Enemy of the World, where a dictator was ruling Australia around the 2013-2018 era. When you have public invasions, like we've seen so many times in Doctor Who, and events that happen involving aliens, the world in modern day UK in the Doctor Who universe and modern day Earth is going to be a lot different than what it actually is on our planet today. And that's just inherent. There are going to be differences. And obviously the show doesn't want to make modern day Earth on those shows seem so different to our Earth that people can't relate to it. But they also have all these aliens who have invaded over the Revival series. And so at this point, unlike in our world, I assume, I guess I haven't seen Paul's, but in their world, there's widespread belief that aliens just exist. Now, I have no idea what happened during Flux. I don't know if people remember anything about this entire invasion. And I swear to God, the story is incomprehensible. But events have happened in Modern Who that basically can't be denied. Yes, UNIT has done all of those making people think it was a hoax or a terrorist attack. I believe that's what the Autan thing was called way back in Rose. Which, for the record, while it was a streak they were hunting, I was really hoping there's going to be an Autan. With all the mannequins in the old derelict department building. But alas, they went to the streak, and that's fine. But I would have liked if it was Outans. Because Outans are just always really fun. I just have a personal affinity towards them. Them and Makra. But the whole issue with the Siguraks, the Cybermen waging war against the Daleks, now maybe that was erased by the Kraken time. The Kraken's pace from Season 5, that's fine. The whole universe did a reboot, but I don't think that actually changed any real history as we know it on the whole. Even as late as Season 8, we had the Cybermen invasion with Missy that happened on modern day Earth, and that had big unit involvement as well. So really, the world has to be out now. Like, the world in modern day Doctor Who they're on a whole different level when it comes to belief in aliens than ours is probably ever going to be.
And it's never quite clear what the public perception of aliens is, what the status quo is during the current era. Like James said, I have no idea what the common person in this, I guess, Doctor Who universe remembers about the Flux incident, if anything. And it's sort of hard to keep track of, I guess, what's going on. I mean, like the Crack to Time made people forget Daleks and Cybermen fighting over Canary Wharf, so did they get those memories back once the crack is fixed? I honestly don't know, to be honest. I literally have no idea. Which I guess what the Madakas did the Daleks just assassinate the Prime Minister like 2 or 3 years ago? It was in one of those Jodie Whittaker Dalek shit episodes, and I can't remember anything about it. But I do know it happened, in a pretty public fashion.
Yeah, I don't like to think about it, but Daleks did exist in, well, I guess all 3 of these passes, but the only pass of interest would be Revolution of the Daleks, which, yeah, sort of been pretty public. I mean, Daleks were going around killing people. Now I realize they said that they were drones, but I don't know. It's just, I'm not sure any writer really knows either what the public believes on this, which is funny because that's actually something, for the record, RTD was very good at in his first series, because he always loved using media to show what news was, what the common person was going to see in all of his big stories that involved Earth. He did it all the time. And in fact, he did it once again because we have Trinity Wowers back, who has been a mainstay since Series 1 of the revival, who is apparently, from what I could tell, like conservative talk show host, basically.
Hey, that's where the money is.
I guess maybe it is, but it's just very too depressing for words, really.
Yeah, you're not going to find people like us making money from conservative news stations. There's just not much money in leftist news, unfortunately.
This is true, but that's also a bit beside the point, alas.
Yeah, and speaking of crazy people, that's why I call conservatives, because I show some solidarity that way. Conrad may not be on the up and up. Because after the interview with Ruby, like James said, they had some cute moments. Oh, he spilled some paper or some coffee and ooh-wee. And Ruby is getting more interested in him. It helps that he seems like he's, I guess, a compassionate guy. He seems interested, and he actually believes Ruby when Ruby's talking about all of this strange stuff that she's been through. I mean, she goes on to say that she's fought like literal gods, and just the experiences that she's seen, the world turn into dust, for instance, not to mention the goblins. So yeah, she's seen some things, and she finally has someone who can actually listen to her and believe her, I guess, outside of unit and her family, of course. So she actually seems to be making a connection with Conrad. They go on multiple dates, and she even agrees to spend some time with him. Oh, I can't remember the name of the village. It was like Colton Village or something like that. Colson Village, I think.
I think it was Corson, yeah.
So a nice romantic getaway would be in the cards, but unfortunately, it does not play out that way. Because Conrad is, as far as we can tell, a right-wing conspiracy theorist slash grifter, I guess. I mean, they sort of tie in. I mean, if you're actually talking about stuff that you believe in, even if it's like batshit crazy right-wing stuff, you're not really a grifter, you're just talking about stuff you believe in and you have no idea what's going on in the world. But if you actually intentionally lying just to make money based off an audience, well, that's a different story. I don't think either one's particularly noble, but certainly one is worth more scorn. And Conrad is apparently with the organization known as Think Tank, and they have a nice, cute little computery logo on the t-shirts. And it seems that this has been a sort of like a month-long scam with Ruby to sort of, I don't know, make fools out of unit, I guess would be the best way to explain it. They sort of like make it look like a Shriek is trying to come after Conrad and is sort of trapping this village. And sort of almost a scene very reminiscent of Ollie's Avenue 3 Yards when they were trapped in that wash bar and they were pretending like some demon was outside or something like that. And it's sort of the same here, trapped in this bar in this small village with this Shriek outside. Ruby gets sort of panicked because she sort of has this sort of, I guess, PTSD thing going on, which I think is interesting, and I'll talk about a bit later. And she actually calls up Kate, they talk a bit, and Kate decides to actually send units down there once the Shriek are quote-unquote conformed by Ruby. But this whole thing seems to be just a, prank's not even the right word, but just a ploy for unit to come down and, I guess, be made idiots of pretty much.
Yeah, and it's a very modern type of trap, because instead of Think Tank being armed, I was thinking maybe they're going to take these agents hostages. No, they do something that works a hell of a lot better, and that's the fact that they're live streaming. So they don't have any weapons, which to be fair, maybe in the UK that would be a little more hard to do anyway. They just have cameras on them, live streaming video of these armed soldiers, some of them pointing guns at them because they've been completely bamboozled, and just basically mocking unit, questioning them to their faces, and insulting unit as a government agency wasting taxpayer dollars, making ableist comments towards Solly, which really just clarifies that Conrad is an asshole. And once this happened, there's really no way for unit to win this encounter. Unit ends up arresting them all. They get out the next day because there was public outcry about it.
I think it's Trinity Walls as fascism in the streets of Britain.
Yeah, Trinity Walls has fallen down a rabbit hole. And so much like we were discussing, these people, Think Tank, are a group that does not believe aliens exist. When it comes to wasting taxpayer money, they believe that this is all just a cover-up for them doing other things with the money. That they aren't fighting aliens, they're just faking it so they can have all these fans for some likely nefarious purpose. Now, I can't help but be reminded of X-Files Season 5, which I'm not going to get into, but there was a similar subplot during parts of this season to something akin to this, government faking aliens to fund the weapons industry. Season 5 was actually kind of based. But they just, much like the flat earthers today and the anti-vaxxers and the anti-COVID people, they just don't believe aliens exist. And maybe there's reason without in this universe, it's hard to tell, but I suspect there's just not at this point. And they're just insisting aliens don't exist. You're using our taxpayer dollars on activities you won't tell us about it, and so they want to expose the lies that are supposedly being perpetuated by a unit. One of the great lines from Conrad, which you can probably guess why I like it so much since I enjoy the chronology, the history of Doctor Who. He says, "There are no Shriek, no Cybermen, no Sycorax, no Yatis in the underground." And obviously the Cybermen reference at this point is probably more likely Death in Heaven. But Sycorax being the Christmas invasion, Yatis in the underground being the Wab of Fear from 1968. And for the record, is of course the first appearance of the Brigadier, Kate's father. And then the very next appearance of the Brigadier, it's kind of amazing he only appeared twice before he became a mainstay, now that I think about it, was the first appearance of Unit in The Invasion, which also would have been a Cyberman story on modern-day streets of London in the 1960s. So really, what the citizens believe maybe should have been up in the air from as far back as then. Because say what you will about the war machines, but they weren't alien, I don't think. And that kind of just is a fun way to tie that in, especially because I'm sure that those early unit things, including the Yatis and whatnot, maybe the Outhands as well, Unit's not as secretive as it used to be. They're basically operating out in the public. They have a giant tower in London, which is unfortunate that it's a public place because they get protests now after this event happens. But all those are probably in the public record. So it's maybe not surprising that he is claiming, hey, there are no Yatis in the underground.
Yeah, and it's also worth mentioning, I guess, and this relates back to the public acceptance of aliens. I'm not sure how public the activities of UNIT are. I mean, right now UNIT have this like giant building. I'm not sure if it's like classified on maps as, hey, UNIT headquarters or something like that. I would doubt it. But I'm not quite sure what people know about UNIT, what people think UNIT is doing. Apparently, people generally think UNIT is doing exactly what they are, because safeguarding the planet against potential alien threats. But I'm not sure, I guess, where the information would have first become public, if that question makes sense. I'm just trying to flash back to previous seasons, and I really don't know.
I think it had to have been maybe Death in Heaven. That's the only thing I can think of. I don't remember the story all that well, but there's a big Cyberman invasion. I would personally just have to assume them because I can't remember what else was important that Unit did. I would have to look at the Unit chronology because I don't remember when the big building appeared. Was that during Flux? Well, see, I'm remembering now and I don't know how I'm remembering it, but the power of the Doctor actually might have been the first appearance of that building because that's where we see Tegan and Ace.
Yeah, I guess in the end, it doesn't really matter. I just don't know when Unit became, I guess, more public with their activities. And the situation, I guess, sort of backfires because, like James said, here they are pointing guns at these people who dressed up as aliens. Sort of makes Unit look, one, ridiculous, two, might question the validity of taxpayer money going to Unit, and might make people question what they're up to. And of course, locking up these people isn't a good image. The media sort of piles up on Unit. Conrad keeps trolling them by releasing, and this doesn't even sound legal on a side note, but by releasing the names and addresses of people affiliated with the Unit. But, I guess he has an audience because there's a crowd outside of Ruby's house throwing oranges at her, so I guess he knows how to get people moving. As one of the TV hosts in that little segment say, he's reached the disaffected youth. So, I guess well done, kid.
And it's interesting to note that Think Tank has actually, in some ways, appeared before. Now, there is a short story that came out last year in something. I'm going to throw a picture up. I think it was the Gold Archives, something akin to that actually brought up Think Tank then. So I guess if we had been reading that 6 months ago, we would have known Think Tank was a thing. And I don't recall who wrote that story. But Think Tank first appeared in one form in the story Robot, way back during Tom Baker's very first season in the early 70s. Now, this is credited to Reddit, where I happen to see this. Apparently, the music that plays when Think Tank reveals himself is the same music that plays during a Think Tank scene in Robot. And when we watch it again, I'm not going to say we've seen Robot more than once, because we haven't. But the music during that scene did have a noticeable beat to it, and it certainly didn't sound like normal music that has been in the background. So it's very possible that might be true. I guess we haven't confirmed it, but I like the thought, and I didn't see anybody disagreeing with the guy in the comment section, so I'll take it as confirmation.
Yeah, like James said, we've only seen Robot once. If we had actually seen it more than once, or if we had seen it more recently, maybe we would have recognized Think Tank like immediately. I imagine there's some Doctor Who fans, maybe not a lot, but there's probably some Doctor Who fans who recognized Think Tank from Robot, saying, oh hey, I wonder if it's the same organization or a spin-off or something. So I do think it's a nice little, it's not quite a reference, but I do think it's a nice appearance. And like James said, they also were referencing what short story you said from last year?
Yeah, and the short story says that they are not a direct continuation of the 70s Think Tank, which is apparently long defunct, according to the research of, ironically enough, Colonel Abraham. But nonetheless, I like to think, even if they aren't the same, and in fact, Howler's Wiki doesn't even call them as the same, they have two separate pages, I still like to say they're basically the spiritual successors, even though they have really changed in a lot of ways in terms of how they portray themselves to the public.
And certainly I don't know if the views right now are more mainstream, but they have, I guess, reached out with the benefit of the modern technological institutions to a wider fan base. In fact, I think it mentions that Conrad had something like 80,000 paid subscribers to his podcast, I guess. So he was raking in the money. He had like 3 properties, including, I guess, property he bought for his mother. So he's doing well for himself. And also interesting to note, he actually had an interview to join Unit. What was it? How many years previously was it? 5, 6? I can't remember.
I think it was 7 years ago. And when he does his whole reveal midway through the episode, he says to Kate something to the effect, if you don't even remember me, do you? And we can talk about the look on Kate's face that looks like she doesn't. And then she greatly retorts to that at the end of the episode.
Yeah, and the ending is sort of strange. Because honestly, it feels like Conrad sort of won. He made Unit look like a fool. He got arrested. He got released the next day after public outcry. I mean, they're literally debating in Parliament whether to cut funding to Unit. And Kate says that they might because they just want to keep their jobs. So it seems like they sort of won. And then Conrad, to me, it seems like an idiotic move. He has an insider working in Unit, fan of his show and I guess his viewpoints. And he gets let into the Unit building. Then he goes up to, I guess, sort of face down Kate and everyone there. He pretty much wants them to admit that they're just lying to the people. The only problem is, as he's doing this, he grabs a gun and hashtag maybe kills someone. Not quite clear. I'm assuming he did, but it's not technically shown.
Well, the guy survived.
Oh, well, okay, I guess attempted to kill someone, but still technically didn't show it. So we don't really know, but what we do know is that he literally goes into this main council room. Now, he's live streaming at the time, but he's carrying a gun, like going into a government building. Like, at that point, I'm pretty sure you qualify as a domestic terrorist. So I feel like at that point, any of his, I guess, credibility would sort of go out the window. Like, who would be supporting him after? Well, I guess to be fair, it's not like a lot of these far-right fringe people have much in the way of quality control. But I just feel like that would sort of void a lot of the movement that he made over the last couple of days.
Certainly for the mainstream media, the more extremists would probably still back him. And that's probably true for both sides of the political spectrum on the whole. And I'm not even saying that's a negative, but certainly the mainstream media support and friendliness that he had been getting would be instantly vanquished. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if there would be reviews of the positive conflicts that he had gotten when he literally turns out to be a domestic terrorist. I think people would probably get fired for something like that.
Yeah, and he sort of calls out Kate, and they have a somewhat heated discussion.
Yeah, I think the discussion with Kate at the end is one of the best parts of the episode, honestly. Because Kate is just done with this guy who's literally doxing her employees. Which again, I agree with Michael, I don't know how that's legal actually. I guess you could make the argument they get money on the taxpayer's dime, but I don't think that would work. But Kate basically, from this point, becomes, in my opinion, the hero of the episode because she goes pretty extreme in dealing with Conrad.
And I think a lot of that stems from the fact that Conrad insulted her father, of course being a brigadier.
Yeah, saying the whole father's life and legacy was just based on the hooks.
And I think also called her father a coward.
Yeah, he called him a coward, and he pointed a gun at Ruby. And she said something to the fact that he has no right to point that. Don't you dare point that at Ruby. Yeah, she just was so down with Conrad by the end of it.
Yeah, I believe the internet would call that hitting her berserk buttons.
So when Conrad insists, hey, just admit it's our lies, show me these monsters, show me this doctor who you say exists. Ruby replies, if I'm not mistaken, that the doctor's not here and he's lucky about it. And then I believe Kate jumps in and says she's happy the doctor's not here because then the doctor would stop her. Now Conrad, way back when he first saw the doctor and Ruby encounter the Shriek, got some alien goo on him from the Shriek, and it's just something that basically means the Shriek's going to attack you. It's basically hiding for you. Conrad was given an antidote by Ruby, but Conrad doesn't believe in aliens. He doesn't think any of it's real. He never took it, and Kate is very well aware of that. So she literally opens the cage for the Shriek so it can harass and attack Conrad. I would say almost to prove a point, except really it's just because she's pissed off. But then again, I still think she's in the right. I know that she was kind of looking villainous or she was doing it and all of that stuff. I have a different sense of morality. Let the Shriek eat him. Conrad sucked.
I just have a feeling that if Unit had let the Shriek eat him on live stream, it might not have turned out well for them.
I mean, it proves that it's not special effects.
Unless a guy in a costume's a cannibal or something.
It happens.
But yeah, largely Kate seems to sick the Shriek on Conrad and sort of plays a reverse Uno card and has him sort of admit that he actually believes and essentially trying to make a fool out of him, which I guess technically he does, but then he immediately backpedals. That's what he do.
Well, that's what they do, really. All of the right-wing smearmongers, the paddlers of lies,
the Nightcrawlers,
the jackals. Yeah, all of those types of people. It's not like it ever matters. It's one of those things, and this has been going over long, so we won't get into it. But all the labourers who try to, look, they're being hypocritical. There's a reason that they've been doing that for at least 30 years and it never gets anywhere. It's because the right wing doesn't fucking care. It's because they have a very different basis of morality, and perhaps to them, they're not even being hypocritical, or even if they are being hypocritical, it doesn't matter because they're still right. So yeah, that's not the way to fight fascism. You don't debate fascism. You don't call fascists hypocrites.
Yeah, and there's a famous quote from, I think it's Mark Twain, that I guess colors this perfectly. Quote, never argue with an idiot. They will drag you down to the level and beat you with experience. And I think that sort of shows a lot of what it's like trying to debate people like flat earthers or anti-vaccine people, any of those, I guess, fringe, far-right lunatics, for lack of a more polite term.
Yeah, and obviously, people are going to have different definitions of what far-right means and exactly who we're talking about. And we'll leave you to decide. But I'll give you a hint. If they use the words woke or DEI or fake news, wait, no, fake news is a Democrats, wasn't it?
Well, ironically, I've heard it used from both sides.
I'll keep it then. That's probably the type of person we're talking about. Or if they hate trans people, they are welcome to fuck off. And they're also the people we're talking about as well.
But yeah, things don't go Conrad's way. He, I guess, gets defeated, question mark. I mean,
well, like you said before, he attacked a government building with a gun, yet he was arrested.
Yeah, I don't doubt that, but what we don't see is any of the fallout from the media. That would have been interesting, if the media after the apologies to Unit, I doubt it. But we don't see any of, I guess, the widespread. I guess we know there's a hashtag I stand with the Unit, and people like the, what was it, hot taser lady?
Yeah, which Ruby used a taser at the very end to save Conrad from the Shriek. And I don't know how Conrad had the gall to do this, but he thanked Ruby. In which case, Ruby, who had been devastated by the betrayal, because Conrad said some terrible things to Ruby during the reveal. She just told him plainly, go to hell. But hey, she let him live. So yeah, Ruby has a different morality than I do, because I would have let him live. But be that as it may.
But yeah, he gets thrown in prison. The doctor comes by to insult him, calling him a little bitch. Actually, he doesn't say it that way, but he gives a somewhat odd speech.
Yeah, the doctor gave a blistering attack on Conrad as a person, but also and I'm assuming this is a part that Michael thinks is odd, the whole right-wing conspiracy theorists as a whole. And all of that part of the speech seemed very rightly. It seemed like not something the doctor would say, because I don't think the doctor says around on Earth reading right-wing blogs and seeing, hey, look what these people are doing. I don't see it. So all of that part of the speech went kind of into a more broader, actual real-life point of view. Felt more to me like a Jodie Whittaker thing, so I didn't like that as much. But when he was actually talking to Conrad himself, and seriously, when I say blistering, he tells Conrad how and when he's going to die. That he will be forgotten, that he won't even be remembered, that he will just be ashes in the wind, and his life will have had no meaning whatsoever. And that when he dies, the world goes on and gets better without him.
Yeah, and I will say this is going to sound sort of odd. I actually sort of agree with Conrad here, because Conrad's like, hey, I don't accept that. I reject that reality. And I guess where I'm coming from, you have this like alien being coming down telling you your future. Why is he supposed to just sit back and accept it? Like, fuck that. Like, no, that's what you think. Let me show you what I'm going to do. Now, maybe it ends up the same way. But no, I entirely understand why Conrad's like, no, that's not going to be my future. I'm going to do something else. And I can understand why Conrad isn't just going to take the doctor's word for it. Why the hell would he? So, yeah, I think Conrad's an absolutely despicable person. But I do think that line, I reject your reality, I think that's actually a pretty good line, and I actually agree with him. That no, of course you shouldn't take the doctor's word for it. Why would you? So yeah, don't be dictated by what other people say. Just lead your life, and like I said, it might lead you the same direction anyway. But there's literally no reason why anyone should just take the doctor's word for it, especially since the doctor just delivered like a blistering speech to him. It's not like he's calming, all quote unquote friendly. So yeah, I mean, yeah, Conrad's a dick, but I actually think that line right there is actually pretty solid.
Yeah, I thought it was a very striking line, because he's been in some ways materialized through the TARDIS, and he's just had the doctor just talking in a way, so we really haven't seen this doctor talk. And at the end of it, he's like, yeah, that's like your opinion, man.
Yeah, and it's not like the doctor can do anything. Well, actually, I guess the doctor could do any number of things, but this specific doctor probably wouldn't. And I think it's just a striking line, and he also says like, hey, get off of my planet, or like send me back to my prison. He's making it pretty well known that, hey, you're an alien, you don't belong here. It's my place, homie.
Yeah, which means certainly on some level, he knows aliens exist. He admits the aliens exist. He just benefits from pretending he doesn't, monetarily and otherwise, in terms of not being ignored as a person.
That's what they call being on the grift train. But luckily for Conrad, every day for him is a lucky day. Because, yeah, the doctor sort of gets him back in the prison. I mean, he's sort of there, like James said, the TARDIS materialized around him. Yeah, but Conrad's just in the prison, just going to live out his days. But hey, someone comes by with a little key for some freedom up in this. And it should come as no surprise that someone is Mrs. Flood.
Yeah, Mrs. Flood, along with being a commander, I suppose, of a space fleet hundreds of thousands of years in the future, is also the governor of a prison in 2025 UK. She's industrious. We should all strive to be like her. Mrs. Flood just comes up in an ending that I kind of saw coming the second we saw him back in his cell. But they filmed in a way that made me think of something like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which might be a negative for some people. I loved it. It was one of my favorite endings I've seen in a while, because it just shows how tight this season is. She's now appeared in 4 of the 4 episodes so far of the season. And while she's likely, I think both my brother and I think she's not going to appear in this next episode, but she's going to show up hypothetically in the other 3. We know she's going to show up in the Intergalactic Song Contest. And I mean, it's going to be a season 2 party. I'm assuming she's showing up there. So she'll be at least, hypothetically, 7 out of 8, which is pretty good. And she's just strolling on up to the cell. Conrad saying, did that even really happen? Already he's doubting it, which fits with his character. And Mrs. Flood comes and says, yes, it did, honey. But it's a bit bigger inside, ain't it? Referring to the TARDIS. And when Conrad asks who she is, in a way that makes me wonder if he's seen her before or recognized her in some way. But perhaps that was a little overacting on his part. Either way, that's what I first thought of, but it's probably not going to lead into anything. She just replies that she's the governor, and that it's Conrad's lucky day because she has the keys to his cell, and she's going to let him out. And everything about that episode ending, I absolutely loved. It was basically perfect for me. During really the end of series 1, everything I hated about the way that season ended aside, the best parts of that were some of the Mrs. Flat parts. And certainly from this season on, I've become like a Mrs. Flat fanboy. I've just really been enjoying Anita Dobson's portrayal of Mrs. Flat. And she was just great in this ending sequence. And her saying that she's the governor, perhaps she just means the governor of the prison he was being held in. That's almost certainly what it is. But you know how the brains of Doctor Who fans work. My mind immediately went to the lore dump that the Doctor gave Ruby way back in Space Babies. And this was among one of my favorite parts of Space Babies. It was kind of flat, kind of plain. But I guess it's a way to catch up new viewers on the lore of Doctor Who. And I swear it went on for 5 minutes straight. They were just walking, he was saying, "Hey, I'm from Gallifrey," all of that stuff. One of the things he said about the Time Lords is that the Time Lords were a bit post. They'd use titles like the Doctor, or the Bishop, or the Rani, or the Conquistador. So who's to say that she's not just the governor of this certain prison? Maybe she is in fact a Time Lord known as the Governor. And again, I'm not saying that's true, it probably isn't. But if it is, that would be such a fun setup from RTD, who set that up all the way back in Space Babies if it happens to come true. You've heard it here first. I've not seen anybody talk about it, so unless somebody has, in which case I didn't see it. But I just thought that was a really cool idea, and it's immediately what came to mind for me.
Yeah, it never came to my mind, but like James said, that was a piece of dialogue from Space Babies, one of the earliest Gatwa episodes. So it'd be sort of fun if they took that line and had like a reference 2 seasons later. So that could be sort of fun if it goes that direction. But yeah, as Mrs. Flat says to Conrad, "Hey, it's your lucky day." And you can assume Conrad is walking to freedom. And I have to say, like James said at the very beginning, this episode really hit a lot of the right spots for me, which is somewhat amusing because it seems like this episode's gotten somewhat of a more mixed reception. Now, I haven't done like a deep dive into what people think, but I have seen a few people list this as like one of the least favorite episodes of the season, which is like insane to me. Like, you actually like the Robot Revolution more than this? But I guess different strokes for different folks. The fuck you using, bruh? Then again, a lot of people liked 73 Yards, whereas I thought it was a jumbled mass of interesting ideas, but failed to make any actual connections worth seeing. So, again, different strokes for different folks. Yeah, like James said, to me, Lucky Day is easily the best episode of this season so far.
Yeah, I quite liked Lux, but Lux was a completely different animal than this one. And I know people found over the wall, I liked it more than Mago did. It wasn't my favorite. It was okay. It was good even in some ways. In a lot of ways maybe, but I didn't love it. But this episode had something that some, perhaps even a lot of Doctor Who doesn't have as much as it used to. Political intrigue. And say what you will about 73 Yards, it did have some type of political stuff going on. It was strange, but it was there. And this was just a very fun non-Doctor romp that one humanized Ruby in a way that, Frank, I'm going to be honest, I think it humanized her more than we'd seen all of Series 1. I felt more for Ruby here and connected to her more in this episode than I had connected to her at all in Series 1. It's nothing against the actress, I just quite connected to the type of character that they seem to be playing. But this episode, with her having basically PTSD from her travels with the Doctor, a very human response to those types of extreme events, I just thought this episode did Ruby a lot of good, and really did everybody in there a lot of good. Kate was extremely strong, and perhaps the best I've seen Kate, maybe since the Power of 3, I don't know, she was really good here. And much like the last few episodes, it's just made me really want to know what Mrs. Flat doing, what's the goal, why is she unleashing Conrad? I'm assuming we're going to see Conrad in the season finale. I'm not sure what his role is going to be, but that's what it looks like is going to happen. I really enjoy this episode a lot. It's hard for me to put into words exactly why it all worked for me, but it really did. And I'm looking forward to see how this continues. Like, this season has been leagues better, in our opinion, or in my opinion, and ours as a totality, than Series 1 was. Because this is all just flowing together, and in a way that Series 1 didn't even try to do.
Yeah, and of course when Conrad said that line to the Doctor, like, "I reject your reality," immediately I was thinking about reality war. I'm not sure if Mrs. Flat can somehow use Conrad's, I guess, reach to further disrupt things on Earth, I'm not quite sure. But I do think it has the potential to be quite interesting. Now, I've been interested in Mrs. Flood ever since the beginning. She's one of the things I was most consistently interested in during the first season, because I was wondering if they're going to do anything with her aside from like one-off looking at the audience type things. It wasn't clear to me if they were actually going anywhere with it. So the fact that they seem to be ramping up is what honestly I think quite playful. And if they actually land this, unlike how the end of last season went, we've got a contender for a pretty strong season here.
Yeah, it's all going to depend on how Rashidi Davis decides to end this season. It's really going to be important to nail this landing. Because the first season, it would have been really massive, but if they had a good landing, it would have ended up okay as a whole. Not great, but okay. But because the season finale was so bad in my eyes, for me, it ruins all the other episodes that had to do with the whole Ruby's mother thing in more detail. It brought all of those down. So if this doesn't have a great ending or a really good ending, or even a good RTD ending, people hated the ending of Last of the Time Lord. I thought it was fine. I've never hated the way that went with the whole 10th Doctor being Jesus meme you see sometimes. That worked for me. I liked it. So he just needs to go back to like what he was able to do, and that would be fine. And I think he should be able to, but it really just does depend on how it ends in, 4 episodes now.
Yeah, and I do agree with James that this episode did wonders for Ruby. I didn't really feel much for Ruby throughout most of the previous season. I wasn't wild about her characterization, but I actually felt some really strong emotion from it in this episode. Like James says, when Conrad is revealing to Unit, I guess, the idea behind Think Tank, he really just brings Ruby down, like telling Ruby, it was a chore to get to know you. I have to put up with your incessant prattling and your piano lessons and all your crazy talk and lies. And yeah, Ruby was breaking down right there. It's actually sort of sad to watch. And I think Gibson did a great job with her performance there. And I mean, there's even a scene later, just when the media is going around patting Conrad on the back for taking down the big mean government, where like Ruby's just crying with both of her mothers trying to console her. And I think it's a really strong scene. And I think Gibson did a really good job with it. And same with Kate. I've said before, I guess on the occasion it may have arrived, but I've never been a big Kate fan. She's just not giving me much to root for. I just never really cared about her one way or the other. She's like another human equivalent of the Lynx. But here you can see that she's, at the very least, exceptionally prideful. I mean, you insult her father, she'll just fucking kill you, bruh. She doesn't care. And I think that's a nice character trait that I don't know if we've necessarily seen that often before. Now, certainly that she got some things in the flux, but given how poor that story was, I don't remember and I don't really care to. But I will say that I really liked what they did with Kate in this one too. So kudos there. And I guess a few small notes that I thought might be worth mentioning. One, Mal did not show up in this episode, even though she's working with the unit. I think it mentioned that she was investigating or dealing with some type of problem on the Sydney Harbour. And I have no idea if that's supposed to be like a slight or reference to the upcoming land between the war and sea. It's worth mentioning that despite the fact I know the title of that show, or the purported show, I have no idea what the actual plot is. I think it has to do with either Sea Devils or Solarians. I would assume Sea Devils, but I honestly don't know. And I just wonder if that's like a little reference to that before it kicks off. But more interestingly, when they were talking about the spy or the mole within Unit, they were talking about how this guy consumed a bunch of like conservative right-wing talking points in media, and it mentioned he was a subscriber to Albion TV. And that's another connection that's had to 73 yards, because Albion was the party that, what's his name, ran under, the guy who became prime minister, whose name I can't remember. If I could remember, I couldn't pronounce it. So yeah, that's a nice little connection right there too. Like, oh, there's some type of conservative media called Albion TV, and of course, like, 25, 30 years down the line, I guess it becomes big enough to help form a political party. So, sort of nice. That is some world building I can appreciate.
Yeah, and if they form from this type of Albion online thing, then you can figure out what type of right-wing monstrosities that party probably is. Could you imagine what their political party looks like?
It probably just boils down to if it ain't white, it ain't right.
Unfortunately, that's probably what it would be.
What's the saying? Keep England English?
Yeah, I believe that's what those people would say, and it's just a reincarnation of the Britannia Party in some ways from the film manga. So it's always nice to see these right-wing parties staying strong. I suppose they all have to start somewhere. But yeah, on the whole, this episode just worked for me in every way it basically could have. I think I ended up rating it a 9 on IMDb. Maybe it's an 8.5, but either way, it's an extremely strong story. The plot twist halfway through, I kind of saw it coming. It's funny. I had told my brother, hey, how about if this happens? I didn't get all of the plot points right, but I got some of it right. And then it happened, and that was just really fun to see. It was a nice story that humanized Ruby. It did amazing things with maybe solidifying some world building. Maybe we actually know where the world stands now, which is nice to see. And I just thought Conrad, as terrible as he was as a person, was a great antagonist because he was able to act so wild in the beginning, and he was able to act so slimy past the halfway mark. It was extremely impressive stuff for him. This episode was really good, best of the season, I would say, so far, and I'm looking forward to seeing Mrs. Flood in the future.
Yeah, and same for me. Like I said, this is a favorite episode of this season. Of course, I hope it can be topped. But if it wasn't, I'll be okay with it because this really was quite good. It hit the right spots, and I guess it's a controversial take of the Brothers Mahoney. If you have any thoughts about this episode, please let us know either down below here on YouTube, or you could reach out to us on Twitter, where I'll probably spend the next couple of days defending this episode from the haters out there. Them haters, though, don't you know? Not that some of them don't have good points. There's some issues, I guess, with the doctor's messaging that could come across as, I guess, what do you say, only somewhat liberal in a way?
Are we referring to the fact that the writer, Masakin Kublam, is defining a system from protesters
because it can come across as, hey, you shouldn't be criticizing your government, or you shouldn't be criticizing, like, I guess, an equivalent of a unit, which I guess would be like CIA. And, I criticize the FBI and CIA on a tri-weekly basis. So, I mean, if you look at it through that framework, like, yeah, I guess you could say the messaging code have used a little bit of work. So if you're coming at it from that side, I can see where it's coming from. But in general, I think it was a pretty solid episode, and it touched me in ways that 73 Hours just couldn't. So I guess kudos there. And I am quite excited to see where this season goes. But yeah, that's all I've got. As always, you've been listening to the Brothers Mahoney. This has been Michael.
And I've been James.
Thanks and enjoy your night.